Oh, so you're from Utah. Did you grow up Mormon? Welcome to Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan. I am so happy you're here. Welcome so much. Welcome to Wandering the Wild Mess. I am going to talk about a topic that I can't believe comes up so much when people ask about my podcast and my life, and that is growing up Mormon. Because I'm from Utah, I feel like that's just the assumption. And I've done an episode about it before. It was very, I think, well received. I gave it from my personal experience, but I thought I'd kind of switch it up a little and incorporate how growing up Mormon feeds into my mess, because I think all of us can relate to the fact that our upbringing, whether that included religion or not, the way that we were raised is hugely impacts our life. And I think when we're younger, we don't always realize how much so. And then as we get older, we're like, oh my gosh, and especially if you've gone to therapy or you're doing any kind of self-reflection or you're really doing the inner work, that's a huge one. My free inner work guide, that's a plug, wanderingthewildmess.com. Go get it. Start doing that work if you want to improve yourself. But I digress. But really, it's growing up Mormon. I guess right now I don't really watch all those shows, but I know that is kind of like adding a lot of questions. And I feel like people are like, is that really what it's like? Is that how it is to be a Utah Mormon? Do you do this? Do you do that? Do you do this because of that? And I just kind of wanted to I've thought a lot about it because like I said, I didn't realize how when you live in Utah your whole life, it's just Mormon's just part of the culture there. So it isn't really oh, you're Mormon. It's kind of almost expected more so that you have some Mormon affiliation. I feel like most people that live there, and it's evolved a little bit since I was growing up, but most people have some kind of Mormon connection if they found their way to Utah. Unless they're just a really, skier or snowboarder. Obviously, there's a million beautiful things in this state is growing now, but most of the time when I was younger, there was some kind of connection. So I wanted to kind of dive in to my personal experience because I feel like people can relate to reflecting back on when you're thinking about your own life. Was this a belief that was kind of taught to me, or do I actually believe this? And that's just kind of an interesting place. And I think we all go there if we've had some religious upbringing to start questioning certain things that we've been told and say, is this aligned with me as an adult, or was this just what I was always told to be true? So we'll talk a little bit about, and the other episode I talk about a lot, so we'll just kind of get through it, and this will be exciting, I guess. So yes, I grew up Mormon. My parents both got married in the temple. I shared this before. My parents wore garments. I just am learning now because I am, just to be clear, no longer a member of the church. I'm not someone that, and if you don't know anything, maybe some of these terms you're I don't know, but I'm not, I guess I'm an inactive member. I didn't go through the process of taking my records from the church. I think there's some people that have other experiences that were less neutral, that felt like they wanted to do that. But for me personally, I have nothing overly harsh to say about my experience with the Mormon church. And again, yes, I know it's Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but it's very much molded parts of this even Wandering the Wild Mess. I mean, I think back to even getting divorced. That was not something that I thought would be my life. And because I do know people in my life and back home, I mean, obviously most people get married young in the Mormon religion, and that's for many of reasons. I mean, it's a lot around and other religions have this too. So I'm not saying this is only something from my experience being Mormon. I'm just saying I only know my experience. I never went to other churches when I was growing up. We went to the Mormon church, and it is very like, you get married, you have a family, you have kids, that's your duty. That's what a woman does, all of those things. So I feel like my life has been such an outlier of that, because I didn't just always feel that strong pull to do those things that the church had kind of taught was what women do. And so even when I met like my ex-husband, I remember him asking if, oh, you want to get married in the temple? And I was like, he was 19 at the time and I'm 21, which, you know, he should have been going, or that's the age that men would be going on a mission. But it was a whole long story. He decided not to. But I was like, I don't even think about getting married. And for me, it was like so crazy. And I realized that like, probably because my like logical kid mind, and this is where I kind of was never super strong in my faith of the church. And that's not to like disrespect the church. It was just me having like 1,000,001 questions. And my parents weren't forceful in making me believe. Like, I remember that I told my dad, I was like, when am I going to feel the Holy Spirit? Like, how will I just know? When do I get a testimony? Like, because we would bear our testimonies, and I would bear them all the time. You know, I think I mentioned this in the last episode. There's this thing where I don't know if other religions do this, but we go up there and you bear your testimony. And, you know, I know this church is true, da-da-da-da-da. And when I was a kid, I was doing that all the time, but I didn't even know what that meant. I just felt like I wanted to get up there and yap on a mic, and that's why I'm doing this here, like that early signs of podcaster before there was even podcasts. But I didn't really have it. I was just up there like wanting to be on the stage saying I have a testimony, but I didn't really know what that meant. I think that was like a truth in that upbringing. Like, some of it made sense, you know, like thou shalt not steal. Like, I was like, yeah, it's not really mine. I probably shouldn't steal. You know, those can make sense. But then some of the other things I was just like, wait, so Joseph Smith was just in the woods and he like found this book and these golden plates and he started interpreting them. Like, why would there just be random golden plates? You know, like, I don't like, so a lot of things I'd question, and I'd be that kid in the church, you know, like, hey, well, that doesn't really make sense. And like, you know, and they're like, but the whole premise of faith is it doesn't really make sense. I get that now. But as a super logical 7-year-old, I was just like, I don't know, guys. Is this just me, or does this seem like a little weird? And it's so funny because I think back and I'm like, my parents were just so in the faith that there was like no unwavering. Like, it's almost as if they didn't even like try to overly explain, because they probably didn't even know. They just like had a true knowing in their heart that the church was true, and that was enough for them. Like, they didn't need to logically unpack and think about all of the reasons. And when I did ask him, it was all just like faith-based responses. Like, my dad was like, you'll just know. You'll just know, Heather. And I'm like, but like how, like what? And that was like an interesting thing. And I think that goes back, like, now that I'm going through life in this wild mess, I've had to lean on faith so much. So shout out for my parents for just always having faith. And I had to take the long way there to go through the journey. And I think too, it was also because sometimes you're not really like understanding growing up. The teachings are like kind of molding your own unconscious bias, which I talked about before. So you're kind of like, okay, I'm not the person that would do this. I'm not the person. You're like kind of developing who you are based on, well, if I'm Mormon, then I don't do this and I don't do that and I don't do that. And it becomes like this ego thing. And I think that's where the church, definitely some members get like a bad rap, because they're like, well, I'm Mormon, so I don't do that. And it becomes this like ego, like I'm holier than thou kind of like perspective, where you're like looking down at other people because you're this, you're that. And I did experience that in the church personally with some people, where I think I talked about it before, like, you know, we weren't like well off growing up. And when my dad got sick and my mom had to go back to work, I remember it was on Sundays and there was members of the church that were like, oh, well, she's working on a Sunday, like, nah, like passing judgment. And that was hard for me because I love my family and I know how good of people they are. And I know that they were never passing judgment. And I mean that. Like, I know that sounds a little outlandish, but my parents were not judging Sally or anybody else. I never heard that judgment from them and so it was hard for me to hear them getting like judged when they were literally living proof that it's not our place to judge. And that was one thing I'll talk about that I've had to learn even as I give compassion to things in my own life or to people is that, you know, when I was that logical kid, I was trying to like connect the dots because I'm like, I'm reading this and I know that Jesus says not to do these things, but he also says like that we're not supposed to judge people. And so I don't really know why people are like, well, I don't do this, but they're judging someone else. Like, what am I missing? Like, I don't understand. Like, is that one okay to do even though it says not to do it? And it was like, brought a lot of confusion where I was like, I don't even know what's going on with this crap. Like, I just don't know. So as I gotten like older, I remember in high school, like I was not active really in the church, but at that point, but I still like, you know, I still was like, you know, talking to, I think like more thinking about dating men that were Mormon. I was, and I don't know why, probably just because that felt like, I don't know. Honestly, actually, I don't know why, but because they probably would have wanted me to get married in the temple, but I didn't even want to get married. So again, I don't know why, but as I'm going through that, I hit a point after high school where I was like, maybe I'm just like agnostic. Like maybe I just don't know. And I bring all that up because I'm so grateful I grew up Mormon. And I'm so and I'll get into that, but I feel like it's because of my parents and less the religion. Because my parents, I felt like were embodying what I think the Mormon church teaches, you know, caring about their children, caring about, like literally my parents never made me feel like a burden. They literally acted like I was the purpose of their life, me and my sister. Like what we wanted to do, all the things, like they just gave so much unconditional love. I never felt like a burden. I never felt unloved. I was never spoken to like in a way that would make me feel less than. Literally, and I know how rare that is. It is such a gift, truly, that was my experience. And I wish that could be everyone's experience. And as I've gotten older, I've talked about this. I know that it is not. And that is part of my purpose of why I want to shed like this light and love to people, because I was definitely given that love from my parents every day of my childhood. And even though we had other difficult circumstances arise during my childhood, so I'm not saying I had a perfect one, but I definitely had my parents' love and belief in me. And part of that was their faith in the church, you know, made them also incredibly loyal people to their morals. Right. So like my parents never drank or smoked or anything, you know, all the Mormon things. We did drink soda. That, I don't know. I'm not going to have that convo, but yes, we did have caffeine in the house. I mean, never a coffee pot, but caffeine. I know, make it make sense. But I say all that to say is that I feel like that wasn't just the church. That was just my parents leading with integrity. But I also realized that it really gave them a framework to follow. And I think that that's what some people thrive in, is kind of to have that structure. And that's why that religious upbringing can be so helpful to some. And growing up Mormon, though, the only thing that I would say that I haven't maybe said before that was challenging is that there is a lot of like guilt and shame as you move out of it, even when you don't realize it. Like I remember definitely judging people that drank and thinking of them so differently. And so the judgment piece is like huge because it's almost like a you and them. It's almost like I'm Mormon, so I don't. And if, and you're almost like, it almost just puts these unconscious biases in your mind. Even if you don't want to be a judgmental person, you just find yourself passing judgment in your mind. And that is something that I think, and I don't think that's just the Mormon church. I'm sure that other, anything that there's like these rules, and if you don't follow the rules, other people want to pass judgment. But I remember someone saying to me that, like we all sin. And so just because someone's sin is louder or more apparent than yours doesn't mean that yours don't exist. Right? So like, just because my mom's working on a Sunday doesn't mean like your dad's not doing X, Y, and Z. It's just because you can see hers. And I guess that whole experience of judgment just showed me how much I don't want to be judgmental in those ways and how much I do want to empathize with people and their different stories. Because look, at the end of the day, we're all here for different journeys. And I feel as though when you lean into just having love in your heart, irregardless of circumstances, of differences, gosh, it feels so nice. It feels so nice. And the church really did a lot of really nice things for my family when we were going through a lot of hard times. So I love that about the community that it brings. I definitely think, I don't even want to bring up this word, but like people are like, well, it's a cult. And I was like literally reading the definition of cult. And it was like, let's see, like you control, conform. It's a strong group identity, discourage of questioning, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not here to like, I don't even know if that like matters. I know people would think that's offensive, but I think we all kind of make definitions based on our own experiences. I didn't personally feel like my family was part of a cult, probably because when I did question, they were like, they didn't really give me a good answer most of the time, but they weren't like forcing me. You just have to believe. Because I didn't have parents like that. I think I did have some friends that their parents, like, obviously we weren't watching rated R movies, but like you couldn't even watch The Simpsons or Family Guy or whatever. And it was like, then you felt guilt if you wanted to, or you accidentally saw it, like the world was crumbling to the end of like stuff like that. It's kind of like, I'm thankful my parents weren't like on that extreme. But I do think the one thing that I'll say about growing up in the Mormon church that probably impacted my wild mess the most is just, I think a lot of why I lived the way I did for so long, even when I wasn't an active member, still was that embedded desire to appear like I had it all together. Like my life was perfect, just avoid judgment from other people because I had felt it in my childhood. I didn't want to be judged. So even when I would meet new people, like even in a work, like corporate culture back in Utah, like it's almost like I could turn on that character of being Mormon. Not that I would say I was, but to perceive myself that way because it was like, oh, I'm a part of it. I'm a part of this. And almost like you kind of help each other out. Like I'm Mormon too. I know all about that. Oh, did you take the Sabbath on Sunday? Just kidding. No one says it like that. But anyways, but you know what I mean? Like it was kind of like a sense of community. And I remember when I tattoos were not a thing in the church when I grew up. I hear now like it's a little more accepted, but it was like an absolute no. And I never thought I would like get one. And before I moved to Tennessee from Utah, I got my first one. It's like a little mountain range on my side and no one can see it. But then since I've gotten one more out in Knoxville, and it was like literally like this military biker. So whatever, maybe it's not perfect, but it's imperfect just like me. And it's in a visible place. And I was like, who am I? Like, it literally felt like I couldn't even believe that I would be someone to have a showing tattoo. And those are the little things I talk about. Even now, after all these years, it was just so embedded that, like, that's not what I do, that it feels so crazy as a grown woman to even do something like that. And so that's why I think in the wild mess, like getting divorced, leaving my family, moving across the country alone, I told you, like, Mormons usually don't move. They're staying in Utah or they're coming back. It's all about family, staying close to your family all the time. And for me to leave, that was huge. I went through the guilt of that. I went through the guilt of so many I mean, even as I'm, not married and like, do I get married again? Like, part of me is like, I'm supposed to be a wife. Like, I can't just be this like not wife. Like, that's my role, and now it's coming up, like a little over 2.5 years of like, since the divorce. And I'm like, I'm still not a wife. Like, what kind of ex-Mormon am I? And so it's silly that like, I still have those thoughts, but I will end this by saying, regardless of your upbringing, regardless of the influences in your life, you get to decide your thoughts and how you perceive those experiences, whether they were good, bad, neutral. That's up to you. And for me, I just take it as I feel like there was more good in my personal experience growing up Mormon. I feel like now I'm at enough awareness to just work through the bias that was unconsciously placed, just based on the experience. But it was good. I mean, we had a wholesome upbringing in a lot of ways, and for that, I'm grateful. So yes, this will wrap up. I guess I didn't get too in the weeds. Make sure to check out my other episode that talks about, so you grew up in Utah, you're a Mormon, or you grew up Mormon. That gets a little bit deeper into some of the Mormon stuff. But thank you for being here and going down memory lane. I hope that helps you better understand kind of where I come from. Two amazing, faithful Mormon parents that are also imperfect, but perfectly made me feel safe to be a kid. So yeah, shout out to them. Dad up in heaven. All right. So just remember, we're all going through different things. Thank you for listening to Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan. You matter.